Hello and welcome back to the Xamarin Forms tutorial where we work on a time tracker app. I'm Patrick and this is the Let's Create series. Before we get started today, I just want to send a special shout out to my two patrons. These two just started supporting me on Patreon and it's incredibly appreciated, so special shout out to Harry and Alfred. Thank you so much, and let's get into today's episode. Today, we're going to focus on creating this item for a work item in the list of recent work. So according to the design, we need a composite view that will take in a few labels and will map to something like a work item. So heading over to our project, let's start by creating that circle gradient. And so we can head over to views, and then in SK views, we should make a circle gradient view. So we'll add new class and let's just call it circle gradient view. And this is going to extend from our gradient view base, just like the rest of our gradients. So gradient view base, and then we'll use a quick fix to bring in the namespace, and we will use a quick fix to implement the abstract class. Now on draw gradient, all we really need to do is draw this circle to the canvas. So we can say var radius to declare how big our circle is going to be. And so this will just be something like math.min, and it'll be the smallest size between the width and the height. So we'll get that from info, and it'll be info.width and info.height. And this way we don't end up with an oval when we use this gradient. And the next thing is we just need to draw it to the canvas. So we'll say canvas.drawCircle is a method that's provided to us. And so we have a couple different options here. We can either provide an SK point for the circle, or we can just provide center X and center Y as floats. And we can do that by saying info.width divided by 2 and info.height divided by 2. And that'll put us right in the center of the view. And then we'll use our radius, which is just the smallest of the two, and we'll provide paint. So this will let us draw that. We don't need this constructor, so let's go ahead and just delete it. And we're good with the view, so we can close the gradient view, and now we can use the view. So what we'll do from here is head over to our page, and this will be our recent activity page. So in here we have a stack layout with nothing, and that's in the frame. And what we're going to do is replace this with maybe a collection view. So let's go ahead and get rid of this stack layout, and let's provide a collection view here. The item source will be something like the recent work, or we might just call it work items or just items. So let's just go ahead and call it items. So this is going to be a list of recent work items. And then from here, we're going to say selection mode, and let's just say none, because there's that button up top that'll be view all according to the design. So no need to allow the user to select a specific work item. Now in here we have a choice. We can either provide a data template specifically, or we can create a reusable view. And if we look at the designs again, and I'll zoom out, we'll see that this item is actually going to be used in several places. So we shouldn't provide an item template in the XAML here. We should create a reusable view. So let's head back to our project. And we'll go to views over here. And let's right click, add new file. And we'll call this something like list item view, because all of our list items are essentially going to be this kind of a composite view. So we'll just call it list item view. We can close the code behind because we're not actually using it. And now we have this content view here. This is good. So what we need in the content view, we can start with a stack layout. And in the stack layout, we're going to have a grid. Now the reason we're using a stack layout and then a grid is because we're going to place this in a data template. Data templates aren't great about margins and padding, but a little trick I've learned is if you kind of embed these in a stack layout or some kind of parent view before the actual data template, then we can control the margin and the padding. So I just kind of embed that here. And then in here, I'm going to create a grid. And like I said, this is where we're going to kind of provide some margins or padding. And so we want this to have a bottom margin. So just 0, 0, 0 for the left, top, and right. And then we'll provide a 20 margin on the bottom. We need some column definitions, and if we check the design, we'll see that our columns should be somewhere around 65. Go ahead and fill in the center, so just an asterisk will work, and then we'll use 80. And that'll be for the amount earned. And then we'll need row definitions. We have a few rows, and our row definitions will look something like 25, 20, and maybe 25 again. And so that'll give us a total of 70 for the row height, as well as a 20-point spacing. And then we can say row spacing. So in between each row of the row definitions, we'll just say 0. Let's handle that per view. All right, the first thing we need is our circle view. So we need to bring in the namespace. So right up here at the top, we can say XML NS, and this will just be like SK views is fine. And then let's go ahead and bring in SK views. And now we can use our circle view. We can say SK views, and this will just be circle gradient view. And now we can give it some colors and some height and which row it belongs in. So let's start with maybe the height. So we'll say height request, and this is going to be 60. We can give it a row span. So we actually want this to take up all of the rows. So we'll say grid.row span, and that's 3 because we have 3 rows. And then we can give it its vertical options of center, and this basically overrides the default, which will make it stretch the whole height, and we'll just center it. And now it'll honor the height request. And lastly, we can provide the start and end color. And so these will be just the same as usual. So this will be static resource, and this will be gradient start color. And the end color will be the same as always. Again, it'll be static resource, and this will be gradient end color. That should be good for the circle gradient view background. And now we can start adding a few labels. So let's add the labels that go over the circle gradient view. So this will be sort of, I'm going to put a comment here. This will sort of be like the number of hours, basically, right? According to our designs. And so this will just be in a stack layout is fine. And our stack layout needs to also have a row span of 3. We'll give it a height request of something like 65. We don't want to take up the whole height, but it can be a little bigger than our circle. And then we want our vertical options to be center again. That'll be the same as the circle, and spacing in this stack layout will be 0. Now in here, let's go ahead and add our labels. We should have 2. We should have the total hours, and then we should have like that little label at the bottom that says hours. So let's go ahead and make that first label. And so this one, its text will be bound to the work item, which is, this is going to take in a list of work items. So it's going to bind to total hours, which is essentially a double. And so what we'll do is basically give it a maximum of something like 2 decimal places. And we can do that with a string format. And so the string format will be 0 and then colon, something like 0 dot number sign. And that'll limit this double to 2 decimal places. After that, we can provide a couple things like text color, and its text color will be white. We can give it a font family. And so what we should end up doing is creating a label that will accommodate this font family every time we want to use it. But for now, let's go ahead and just use the font family that we have. So that's that Nunito extra bold. We'll provide some vertical options, and we'll say end and expand. And then the hours label, we will say start and expand, and that should put them about right in the middle. And then we'll finally provide a font size, and this one can be 20 to start, and we'll see how it looks. The next one we'll do is another label, and this text is just a hard-coded hours. And it has the same horizontal options of center, which we actually may have missed on this one. So let's go up to our previous label and let's add some horizontal options of center, because that's going to need to be center. And so now we have horizontal options here, and our vertical options will be, whoops, let's do vertical options, and they'll be the opposite. They'll be start and expand. And the text color will be the same. It'll be white, but our font family will change. And so instead of this extra bold, let's go ahead and use light. And then after that, we can set the font size, and that'll be 15, just a little bit smaller than that initial one. And let's add a margin to pull it up. And so instead of having a top margin of some positive number that pushes it down, what we'll do is add a negative number, and that should pull it up a little ways. It'll also pull that top label down a little bit, but that'll kind of get rid of that line spacing in the label itself. And that takes care of our number and hours. The next thing we'll want are those other labels we have. If we check out the design again, I'll leave the simulator up here. We have these two labels here, like the time span and then the date, and then we have one label to the right, and that is the total number of dollars earned. And so let's go ahead and add those three labels now. So we'll add that first label, and this label will be bound to some text, like we'll call it start end. And so instead of binding to an actual work item, what we're going to do is bind to like a list item view model, so we can add what we need here. So this will be binding, and this will be something like start end, and so that'll be that little date range that we had. We'll put this in the second column, so grid.column is 1 with column index starting at 0, and its vertical options are going to be end, and we'll put this in the second row, so grid.row at index 1 with the same thing, row being starting at index 0. And then we'll say its vertical options are center. Its text color is going to be that darker gradient color, so it'll be static resource, and that'll be gradient end color. It's going to be bold, so the font family will be that Nunito bold. And it'll have a font size of 15. Seems good. And then we need that smaller label for the date. So text will be binding, and this will be something like date or date string or something like that. And so after here, we'll add it to the same column, but the next row. So it'll be grid.row is 2. And that'll be that last row that we have declared up top. And then its vertical options are going to be start, and that's going to try to hug it up to the label above it. Its text color is going to be some dark gray. And so in the designs, you can click and find the hexadecimal color code. And so what returned was B2, 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 and that's just this gray color, and so that'll work for us. Font size is going to be 10, and the font family is going to be that bold as well, but it'll be italic also. So Nunito bold italic, and that'll end that. Now I think we are going to want to bind a job name to that list so that we can see maybe recent activity with multiple jobs, which I think makes sense. But for now, so that's why we have 3 rows. But for now, we'll leave it blank. We can add the label, so we might as well. Let's go ahead and make the label. This label, the text will bind. I'm just putting this above our start end. So the binding will be job name is fine. We can just say name. Let's just put name. So we'll bind to name, and its column will be 1 as well, but its row, as you could probably guess, will be 0. So grid.row is 0. That's first row. The vertical options here will be end, and so we're going to kind of hug that down to that middle label. And the font size will still, again, be 15. But our font family will be the same as the one in the middle. So we're going to use a Nunito, and this isn't according to the design. We just kind of added this when I was, planning this episode. So now we have those three labels. We need a view model for this list item. So let's head over to our view models folder, which is above views. We'll right click, add a new class, and this will be list item view model. List item view model. This is going to extend from extended bindable object. I'll use a quick fix here to bring in the namespace. And then we need some properties. So let's look at what we have here. And so we have total hours, which basically comes from work items specifically. Then we have name, start, end. These are all strings, and we can just make them strings in the view model, and that makes everything a little easier. Except total hours is going to be a double because we have a string format here. So we have name, start, end, and date. So we'll start by making a private string name, and then its public version, just like normal. So that'll be name get, and that will return name, the private member version, and set will set property on the reference to name, and it will pass in value. And we'll do the same thing for start end, which is also a string. So that'll be public string start end, and we will just say get. We'll return start end, which I missed, I skipped ahead, but set property will set a reference to start end here, and it'll pass in value. And now I'll go back and make that start end. So private string and then underscore start end. That takes care of those. I'll do the same thing for date. So I have a string date, and that'll be underscore string. Date, and then public version, so public string date, and I'll just get and return this underscored version, and then set property with the reference to date and pass in value. Finally, we got that double, so private double, and this will be total hours, and then the public version, so public double, and that'll be total hours again. It'll return the underscored private version, and it will set, it'll call set property, pass in a reference to total hours and value. Now when creating these items, we can make a couple constructors. When they're needed and used, we can do it here, but for now, right now we only need it for work items. So let's go ahead and allow the consumer to pass in work item, and we'll just call this model is fine. And then from here, we can do the mapping for all the consumers. And so our name will be model.jobName, which actually doesn't exist. We're going to add it. So this will be job name, and we'll add it to the work item model. Next is start end, and start end will be mapped in a way. I used the $sign in front of the string so that we can just kind of use a faster syntax. We can use these curly braces. So I'll say model.start, and then we can use like a toString, but we can do that with just a colon. And so then we can say like lowercase h, which is your 12-hour clock, and then the double digit M and TT, and that'll give us kind of that hours and minutes with AM or PM. And then after that, we can just put a space and that hyphen and do the same thing for model.end, and that'll match our design here. So just like that. After start end, we have date. And so date can just come from like model.start. So we can say model.start.toString and just provide the format in here. 4 M's for month to be the full month, 1 D for day, comma, and then 4 Y's for year. And that is, according to design, that'll match up. So now let's head over to the work item model. I'll just right click on work item and go to declaration. We need to add this job name. But this work item itself should track basically its earnings or how much it's worth. So if we go to the design, we'll see it's got like a plus 15 in the design. And this can be calculated based on the rate for the job, which we haven't created a job item yet, but we're going to. and maybe times total hours, which we already get here. We get a total here. So let's create that job item that the work item will be a part of. So we'll add this to models, and it'll be a class. We'll just call it job item. Job item needs to be an identifiable because we will be adding it to Firebase. And it needs to have an ID per the interface. And it can just be get set is fine. Along with the ID, it needs a name. So public string name is fine for now. And it needs a rate. So we'll just say public double and then rate. And this will be how much the job is worth hourly. And now each work item can keep track of a job or be attached to a job. And you might think relational database wise, we'll just use a job ID. But with Firebase, we use documents. And so duplicate data is okay. We want a document to be self-contained. And so this is going to contain a job item. So we'll just say public job item. We'll just call it job is fine. And now back to our ListItemView model. We don't really have a job name anymore, so we can delete that. We just want to make sure job is not null. So if we can just say if model.job does not equal null. So if it doesn't, let's go ahead and fill in name and earnings. I guess we're missing earnings. So in our list item view, we are missing earnings. So let's go ahead and add that. That's that label all the way to the right. So that'll be another label, and its text will be bound to, let's, I guess, just call it earnings. Binding earnings is fine, I suppose. We could make it a string. Yeah, we'll just make it a string. That's easier. Yeah, we'll just make it a string. That's fine. Because then we could say, you know, undefined, or we're not just limited to a format on a double. So that'll be bound to earnings, and then we have grid.column, and that'll be not the middle column, but the last column. But it will take up a basically a row, either row 1 or row span of all. I think I'm okay with row 1, so just put it kind of in the middle, just because the top and bottom rows are 25 height each, so that should be okay. We do have a horizontal option here, and that's end. We're going to put it all the way to the right. And its text color is not the dark gradient, but the other. So that'll just be the start gradient. So static resource, gradient start color. And that's kind of that bright blue color. Its font size will stick with 15. And its font family is the bold. So this will be that Nunito bold. And we're starting to see, whoops, it's not bound, so we don't use the curly braces. We're starting to see some duplicate attributes on labels, right? So we have, in this case, we have a font family, Nunito bold, font size 15. Same with the one above it and the one below it. So this is a good candidate for a reusable label that we can set these properties once. It applies to everything, and then when the time comes to make that change on one of these labels, we can go and make the change in one spot and it changes everywhere. So let's do that real quick. We'll head over to views. We have labels, and we'll call this a bold label, just regular bold. So we'll say new file. It'll be a content view XAML, and we'll just call this bold label. We can close, well, we can't, because we need to change this here in the C# code behind. We're going to change content view to label. And now we get that error because it's not the same as its XAML variant. And so we'll change this content view to label as well. And we'll get rid of basically everything and replace that last angle bracket or greater than sign with the / greater than to close the element. Now when we save, our error should be gone. And once it's gone, you can go ahead and close that file. And now we're in here, we're going to add these properties that we were using in the view. And so that is the font family, and the font size. And those are pretty common and consistent among at least 3 of these. So let's go ahead and copy font size and font family, and we'll paste them into here. And I'll press enter just so that they're all lined up. I'll save. And so now I have font size 15, font family, Nunito bold. And so now we can reuse this everywhere. So if we just bring in our labels namespace, XML-NS, I'm back over here in the list item view. And we can say labels equals labels. Now we can change these out for labels, bold label. And now we can get rid of bold and 15 actually. So anything that is bold and 15, we can swap out for labels, bold label. And that gets rid of a lot of that code duplication, but it also makes it easier once it's time to update all of our bold labels. We can update it once and it'll update everywhere. So let's get rid of both of these here. And I'll change this to bold label as well. Bold label. All right, so all of those are bold label. That's good enough. And now we can head back over to work item. Maybe not. I think we need to go to list item view model. And so we're checking to see if job is null or if it's not null. If it is in fact not null, then let's go ahead and add the job name, or we called it just name. And that'll be equal to model.job.name. And then the earnings here, which we bound to, but we didn't add, is private double. Oh, I think we wanted to make it a string actually. So string earnings, and then a public version of that string earnings. And then this is going to be the same kind of thing here. Get and set. So underscore variant of earnings, and then set will use set property on the reference to that private member. And that gets us there. So the next thing here is to set earnings. And we're going to set earnings equal to, and we'll go ahead and use the $sign so we can kind of shorten the syntax here. And we want to add a plus sign. According to the design, we have a plus sign. And then in here, we'll do model.job.rate, which we get from the job item attached to the model. And we'll do times. And it'll be total hours, which we haven't actually set yet. But we'll set it above here because that comes from the model itself. So we'll just set it to total hours. And then this whole thing should be kind of like itself have a dollar amount plus decimal. So that's good there. So I, in the parentheses, I have the model job rate times total hours, which will give us kind of the earnings there. And then the string format makes it $sign and a currency, basically. So after that, we have else. And then we can just say kind of like the name and the earnings are undefined, I guess. We don't actually ever want to see this, but we don't want the app to crash. So seeing this is better than the app crashing. So earnings, and that'll be kind of also undefined, I suppose. All right, so now we actually need to do something with total hours. And so we can do that right here. We can just say total hours, and that'll equal model.total. And then we can say like total hours, and that'll give us, you know, if they worked 45 minutes, that'll give us 0.75. So that looks good there. And now we can kind of see how it looks. So first we need to go into our services. We have this mock work service, and we need mock work service to start actually adding some job information as well. So these can all be a part of the same fake job. And so let's make a fake job. We'll just underscore in the constructor amount mock work service. We'll just say underscore job equals new job item. And this job item needs a couple things. ID could just be, it's a string, but it can be 1 or something like that. Name can just be something easy like Xamarin.Forms app development, I suppose. And then after that, we have rate. And let's just say something easy like, I don't know, 30.2 30.25, I guess. 30.25. We're going to have a little bit of a problem. Underscore job isn't defined, so we can quick fix here to generate the field, and now we have a private job. And so now we can actually just add this job to each work item. So job equals underscore job, and we'll do the same thing for every work item you have in the mock work service. And so that adds the jobs to each one. And so now we should be able to run the app, and hopefully we see kind of what we expect to see. So let's try to run the app. With the app running, we can log in. So I'll just use my test user. And that'll get us to the dashboard, but we'll immediately notice that we bound to like an item source called items. But you know, looking back, I guess we didn't actually create that item source. So let's head back to our recent activity page model, and let's definitely create that collection of items. So our collection view here is binding to a collection called items. We can also see just by looking that we're not actually using our list item view. So we should do that as well. But in the recent activity page model, let's go ahead and create that collection. So this will be, I believe, just a list. Nope, it looks like we can make just a list. So we'll do private. This will just be a list of list item view model, and we can use a quick fix for both of those namespaces actually. And this will just be underscore items, and then we'll make the public version of that, and it's got to match what we have in XAML. So this will be list item view model items, and then get, just as always, we'll return items, and set will call set property here. It'll pass in a reference to that private version, and it'll pass in value. So now that we have that, we can bring in the interface for our work service, which is kind of like that, mock work service, which we have registered in the page model locator. But no worries here. We can just say iWork service and just call it work service is fine. Then we need a local copy or reference to that work service. So we'll create that here. So work service with an underscore equals, and then the work service that was passed in. And then a quick fix will bring in just this little work service here. So in initialize, we'll override initialize. And we need to bring in those work items. So this initialize async method is going to need to be asynchronous. I mean, it doesn't need to. We could chain these together with a continue, but let's go ahead and just make it asynchronous. We'll deal with that error in a moment, but basically we want our work items, and we'll set that equal to await, and then this will be our work service dot get. Maybe for this period, like recent, maybe that could be recent. And then we'll just check to make sure work items is not null. So if it's not null, and then in here, let's go ahead and set our work items, or just items, right? That's what we called our collection, and that'll equal work items dot select. Oh, we need to bring in link, so select, and then a quick fix to bring in link, and we'll select a work item, but instead of an actual work item, we'll kind of create a new list item work view, and we already made our constructor to pass in the work item itself, and then we could just .toList this, and that'll put that there, update the view to go ahead and use what we want it to use. And so instead of return here, let's just await. And so we'll await base.initialize async, and that should be good there. We are not ready to rerun the app. We need to use our new view that we created. So up top, let's go ahead and include the namespace for views, because that's where we put that list item view. It's just in the views directory. So now that we have that namespace imported, let's go ahead and inside of the collection view, which we already have the opening and closing attribute, let's go in here and say CollectionView.itemTemplate. And this will be a data template. And in this data template will just be our views, and that will be the list item view. And that already binds to the view model type that we have as the collection of items, and so we should be good there. So we created our collection items. We also are using the new view we did. So let's go ahead and rerun the app. And so I'm going to stop the app and I'm going to do a clean. And then I will do a run to see if we're good. So with our app running, we can see that we do have our list items, but we immediately notice a problem. We don't have the circles, instead we have squares. And so we don't really want that actually. So let's go into our circle gradient view over here in views, SK views. Let's see what maybe happened. So draw circle is right. And we can see here what most likely happened. So we're taking the minimum of width and height, but that's probably going to be diameter. So for radius, we need to divide this by 2. So let's go ahead and just divide that by 2 here. And then we'll rerun the app and hopefully we see some circles. With our app running again with that change, we see that we do actually have circles and it actually looks pretty good. This is basically what we have in the design minus this sort of label we have up top, which is like the job name. But I do like the addition of this job name, so we're going to keep that. So I think this is how we will leave the list item, at least for now, but probably permanently. I think that's a good stopping point for today's video. If you like the video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments section. Thank you for watching the Xamarin Forms tutorial. I'm Patrick, and this is the Let's Create series.